Good day everyone, my name is Samson Avetian. Today we're going to talk about three subjects here: competition, innovation, technology. I'm going to share some of my thoughts on this matter, and hopefully that will be useful. Okay, so for context, and this is quite obvious for most people, we have a couple of different structures in the economy, in the private sector. One is, of course, perfect competition, where a company doesn't have control over price, so the market sets the price, so you don't have control over it. You have partial control over costs, which means the wages are set by the labor market, the interest rates are saved by the loanable funds markets, and so on. So, which means this kind of industry structure is usually quite volatile, risky, with low profit margins. And by the way, I put this just as an example here. We have revenue costs, so you cannot control the price, and you cannot control a lot of the costs. Okay, which means this sector is not that attractive to be in. And if there's another structure, there are a couple of structures, but these are the most frequent that you come across. And the other structure is, of course, the branded competition, where you do control the price. Same thing here as above, which means this type of competition is usually more advantageous with regards to riskiness, with regards to profit margin. So that's why generally companies strive to move from this type of environment to this type of environment. Why is this relevant for Armenia specifically? Is because most of the companies here, unfortunately, are still yet to transition towards this stage here. Branding takes a lot of time, and it's not just a name, as the next slide will show. A brand is usually a story, but as I put there, a story is nothing without innovation. Okay? So what's a brand? A brand is usually your ability to charge a higher price to the customer. And the customer doesn't look at what the cost you incur, but how much you can actually how much can you raise the willingness to pay, and thus charge a premium price. So that's kind of how you can see whether the brand is strong or not. And obviously behind that, you need to have a story, you need to have quality behind the product. You cannot sell, usually, in most cases, you cannot sell a bad quality products for a premium pricing. Usually it comes from customer service, etc. But it also, a lot of times when we associate brands, we just think about, well, it's a brand, it's a store, it's a nice kind of, it gives me a nice feeling when I buy some of these products. But usually there's a lot of innovation here behind it as well. And what type of innovation do we usually associate with this? Is design features, it's new models, and also new technology. So if you take a look at branded apparel, whether it's Nike, whether it's Chanel, whether it's cars, usually they have to change design and features every half a year or so for them to be able to sell more product, to generate new interest, so the demand for the products go up. And obviously technology is a key factor here as well. If an electronics product doesn't come with new technology innovation, then obviously people will not buy, will not renew this. So a lot of this competition, okay, brand is very nice to have, but if you don't do this part here, the innovativeness on design features, new packaging, for example, is very important for consumer goods products. Without this stuff right here, it's usually not going to work that well in the long run. So without innovation, what I put here, without innovation, a company loses both pricing power, the premium pricing ability to price premium, but also you lose market share. In both of these structures, by the way, in the long run, if you don't do any of this, especially, this is kind of needs to go on continuously, but this is the stuff that needs to happen over and over again. New features, new designs, and so on. So if you don't do this type of things, well, basically you end up with very low profitability in the business. So, and then usually when it comes to innovation, we talked about it in the previous slide, but here, usually when we talk about innovation, there are two areas of innovation that take place. First, innovation is the product production side, also sometimes referred to as supply-led innovation. And this is how you enhance the productivity, how much less material you spend, how much less waste you generate, how much less labor hours you need to put into the production to produce the same output. What are the new stuff here that you certainly have come across? Well, it's software as a service, business process reengineering, cloud, all of that stuff is on the supply side. What does it do to you, to a company? Well, it lowers obviously your costs, your cost base, which results in higher profit margins versus your competitors as well. And then on the other side, and this we kind of talked a bit in the previous slide, on the other side you have also customer product-led innovation. And this is the thing that I referred to previously, generating new demand. Okay, and here we generate new demand, we can charge premium pricing, people, when they see new products from us, obviously they buy from us instead of the competitors. So here we kind of try to tie in your competitiveness, market share, profitability into innovation. Now, both of these, as you see here, both of these have a high impact on our profitability and also market share. And then another helpful kind of model to have in this regard, to understand, okay, if we have a market and whatever industry you're in, a lot of times we refer, for example, apparel market, consumer electronics markets, car market. A lot of times you can segment the market in different niches and segments, because obviously one type of a car does not compete with all, one kind of a car brand does not compete with all brands, right? You can segment them and put a couple of car models here, a couple of here, and so on and so forth. So why is this helpful? Is because in this way, this differentiating market approach reduces the amount of competitors you have. So if you differentiate yourself, if you create a brand, if you create a story, then you're not competing towards every and single producer. We compete a smaller subset. And then we can put in new competitors, traditional. So if this is a car market, this is Ford, GM, Toyota, Volkswagen, of course. Then a new competitor might be the Chinese brands that kind of developed a lot, and also Hyundai, the Korean ones, and so on. But what's interesting here is why a new competitor here takes demand from these companies here, or a new competitor entering here, or whatever niche you have here. Anytime a new one enters, they take obviously demand and market share. But also what's very interesting and important to note is then you have certain type of disruptive innovation, that's usually called, and I'm sure you know about this as well. So disruptive one is a new company that is totally different business model, totally different technology. And whether we talk about retail sector like sales and Amazon comes in, or supermarket AM that maybe I'm using but in Armenia, or maybe it's Gigi coming in, when we have tons of traditional taxi services here, and then Gigi comes in and gives a totally new business model, totally new technology. And obviously what happens is they come in, and by the way, this sector grows far higher growth rate. It has far higher growth rates than all of this combined. So if you have one type of a company that's called disruptive, comes in, they kind of generate an exponential type of growth, take market share, and these market share for these, all of them, try to get reduced. And this is accelerations you kind of see in research on business and innovation when you kind of go through the material there. So this is kind of tries to put it in a kind of a contextual frame. And these are, for example, different segments, what happens to their market share for different companies. And there's also something called incremental innovation. Now you can innovate, of course, on your production side, so you become more cost-effective, productive, but also you can innovate on the demand side. This is kind of demand side of it. Okay? And to kind of conclude, so the conclusion from all of this is, without branding, a company risks remaining in a low profit margin and low volatile business type. Okay, so we don't brand, we become a commodity, and that's not a good place to be usually. But without innovation, even this branding will not work. Okay, a company risks either losing market share or be forced to exit by the disruptors. So if a company that's there and somebody comes in with a totally new business model and technology on the demand side, as I referred to previously, well, basically, maybe you're gonna, in the worst case, you might be forced to exit the market in total. But this is not all kind of concerning news. There is some good news here, is the fact that there are two things. Well, basically, with flexible organization, cost structures, and business model, firms can adjust and to meet the new competition and kind of maintain their market share, defend their market share. And secondly, for Armenian businesses specifically, I would say, or any developing country businesses, a lot of the technology and product side trends, whether on the supply productivity or demand productivity or demand innovation, all of this stuff usually takes place in, let's call them, technology centers in other economies. So they get implemented there, disseminate from there, and slowly, gradually migrate. So if you want to be kind of ahead of the curve and try to understand what's going to come to a developing country like Armenia at some point, well, you can basically have an advantage if you kind of follow the trends, follow the markets, and what's going on there. So I guess that was it. Thank you for your attention, and hopefully that was useful. Thanks a lot.